Now, as the thick toxic haze or smog returns to Delhi, Noida, Gurugram, as well as the surrounding places, after people burst crackers on Diwali night, violating the Supreme Court's ban order that led to heavy pollution all across the national capital region. Joining us for further clarity on the matter, Environmentalist Vimlendu K Jha at the moment. Thanks so much, sir, for making time for us. You know, I haven't heard so many firecrackers in a long time in Delhi, and I know this could be area specific and could vary, but either there's a ban or there isn't. And if there is a ban, don't you agree that someone is not performing their duty? And while firecrackers may not be the primary cause of pollution, one cannot deny that they do have an adverse impact.
First of all, firecrackers do have a role to play. In fact, if you look at the AQI levels, despite the weather conditions and the favorable weather conditions and wind speed that we have had last couple of days, if the air quality index in various parts of Delhi is still 900 or above 700 or somewhere crossing 999 mark, it clearly is because of the firecrackers. Indeed, firecrackers are not the perennial sources of pollution. It's an episodic source of pollution, but it's really worse. If you look at the reports this morning, PM 2.5 levels have actually crossed 30 times the permissible levels. And of course, what the pollution that you see visibly is only one part of the entire conversation. It's also the invisible pollutants that is actually going to stay in the air for days together. The most unfortunate part is that, when Delhi is reeling under severe air crisis, and, we are looking at doing everything. People are, the ICUs are inundated with patients. We would be expecting ideally from a sane society a more responsible, a more responsive behavior, but it hasn't really happened. As in yesterday we saw children bursting firecrackers indeed, and when we already had a report just last week saying that 1 in every 3 child actually has some sort of a pulmonological disorder or some sort of a lung disease or breathing disorder in that sense. So when you have an unhealthy society, when you have a haze around all around you, when you know that the AQI levels are severe, when cities usually evacuate at 300, 350 in that sense, or shut down. Here we were, all of us, completely ignoring the data in front of us or the air under our nose, and we just looked at religion, and our right to pollute became more paramount than our right to breathe. And that's the most unfortunate part. Indeed, Supreme Court for several years comes very, very heavily and says that, well, firecrackers should be banned. But Indeed. Supreme Court is not part of governance. It can only tell you what to do and what not to do. At the end of the day, it has to be ensured by 2 other stakeholders. One, indeed, the citizens that should be more worried about their breath and their health of their elderly, children and everyone. And the other is our police, as in where was the police? How can so many bombs be brought in to the city of Delhi or Delhi NCR and burst in not in that sense of broad daylight, but in broad night light.
Right. And Mr. Jha, just picking up on what you've been saying, the air crisis in Delhi and large parts of North India actually has come to be framed predominantly as a failure of environmental and public health management. But the intriguing puzzle, though, as we've seen in the past 2 days, as you've been mentioning, is not the repetitive nature of the crisis, but the collective inability to fix or even substantially mitigate the problem.
Absolutely. So it's collective apathy. It's a collective failure of every arm of governance and also of citizens on the day of Diwali. Usually, I put the onus or the responsibility of air pollution mitigation or solving this public health emergency onto the government. But yesterday, what has happened is also the citizenry that has violated its own right or its own common sense of breathing air or their own health. Right. Usually, of course, central government, respective state governments, municipalities, all of them are supposed to be working together. And we've seen in the last 10 years, none of them even talk to each other on air pollution issues. We only see knee-jerk, reactive, some sort of odd even or very random measures. And these are not even called measures. They won't even qualify as band-aid solutions, is what we get to see in the name of air quality governance. So it's real travesty of governance. It's clearly, when your economic priorities are more important than your health priorities or your environment priorities, this is what you get to see. Is it a solvable problem? Yes, it is a solvable problem because we do have the emission inventory. We know the sources of our pollution, but we only wake up in the month of November and face the haze.
It is a solvable problem, but effective solutions will require reductions in multiple sources of emissions. And there's no disputing that we can't be looking at this problem just for 6 weeks annually. But sir, public transport has moved to CNG. There are restrictions on old vehicles, as we've noticed. The electrification of the fleet is currently on. Coal power plants have been shut. But what's your assessment? What has worked so far?
So if you look at public transport venue, this is what you read out is from what Aam Aadmi Party or the Delhi government claims that they've done all of this. First of all, CNG, the public transport became CNG not because of this government, is because of the Supreme Court. But in the same judgment, there was also a line that says that we should actually have more than 10,000 buses. And in fact, this was many years ago, and still we have a deficit of 5,000 buses. So have we actually solved the public transport crisis? We have not. And therefore 30% of overall air pollution load is through vehicular emissions, and Delhi still has deficit of at least 5,000 buses and last minute connectivity and so on and so forth. The second is, the other source of pollution is construction demolition dust, which is again 30%, and we've seen how there's so much construction going on in Delhi NCR. Also at the same time, it's the air shed. It's a regional problem. So it's not just about the power plants that you shut in Delhi, but the power plants that have to be shut in the entire region. You will have to have a regional approach, indeed local, regional and national approach towards air pollution mitigation. Right. Because, just because Delhi has, say, perhaps electric vehicles, it doesn't really matter because the air doesn't follow a political boundary. As in the air that is there in Gurugram and the air that is in Noida and the air that is in RK Puram, it's a shared air shed, and therefore there needs to be a shared strategy, a common regional strategy. And indeed, we must not be doing enough. And that's the reason why the air quality is where it is today. Because if so-called measures were really working on the ground, if that fancy pseudo smog tower really helped, you and I would not be discussing this on air pollution each day for a decade almost.
Mr. Jha, as we wrap, we know cloud seeding has been coming up in the headlines. We know it's an artificial method used to increase rainfall. But tell us, can artificial rain tackle the air pollution crisis of the scale that we are currently seeing in Delhi and the National Capital Region?
I don't know why do we actually look at end of the pipe solution that let's pollute and then let's cloud seed. The same thing we did with smog tower, that let's pollute and then let's set up these 20 crore each smog towers that Delhi would need, that Delhi has. Imagine in terms of cloud seeding also, there's no data in terms of how many cloud seeding efforts or how many such multiple rains we would require and what's the cost of implementing that. It's a great, headline management to say a fancy scientific solution to a crisis called air pollution. Solution to pollution cannot be post-pollution. It has to be pre-pollution. You have to really look at how do we cut down our pollution rather than look at, hey, let's keep polluting and then let's look at how do we solve this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Jha, for joining us this morning. The PM 2.5 levels, as Mr. Jha has pointed out, is 30 times the permissible level. The ICUs in the National Capital Region are inundated. It's a worrying situation. We can only hope that the weather conditions comply and the days ahead of us look better.